Welcome back to Significant Talk, everyone. We're on episode 4 now.
Episode 4.
Still working our way through Dr. Hamdi Al-Hakimi's Modern Medical Statistics course.
It's a good one.
It is, and last time things got pretty detailed, right?
Yeah, all those different ways to measure how often diseases happen.
Exactly, disease frequency.
Yeah.
But today, we're going to see how those frequencies are related.
Yeah, using a really cool tool.
Okay, give us a little preview. What tool are we talking about?
The 2x2 table.
2x2 table, all right.
Yeah, sounds simple, but it's so powerful, especially in health research.
Okay, I like it. Simple but powerful. I'm intrigued.
It helps make sense of all that data.
Yeah.
Helps us see cause and effect.
Okay, so before we get to the table itself, what's this bivariate analysis thing?
Oh, that's just a fancy way of saying we're looking at two variables at the same time.
Two variables.
Yeah, like, are they connected? If so, how strong is that connection? And, like, does one cause the other?
Gotcha. So how do we figure that out?
Well, there are a bunch of ways, but today we're focusing on what's called cross-tabulation, using that 2x2 table.
All right, so literally a table with 2 rows, 2 columns.
Exactly. 2 rows, 2 columns.
Okay, and what goes in those rows and columns?
So the rows, those represent your independent variable, the potential cause, or exposure.
Okay, exposure, got it. And the columns?
Columns are for your dependent variable, the outcome, the effect. In health research, that's often the disease.
So let's say we want to know if drinking from a certain water source is connected to, I don't know, getting diarrhea.
Perfect example.
Water source would be our independent variable. Goes in the rows.
Yep.
Diarrhea, the outcome, that goes in the columns.
Exactly. And then each cell in that table holds the number of people who fall into each combo. Yeah, like top left cell. That'd be the number of people who drank from that iffy water source, A and D, got diarrhea.
Makes sense. So you can see the connections right there in the table.
Right. But you know what Dr. Al-Hakimi emphasizes?
What's that?
Percentages.
Why percentages?
Raw numbers can be kind of misleading. Percentages let us see proportions, and that makes it way easier to spot relationships.
Okay, so you're not just looking at the number of people, you're looking at the percentage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What percentage of people exposed to this thing had this outcome?
So our water example.
Yeah.
If 50% of people drinking from the suspect source get diarrhea,
Uh-oh.
but only 10% of those using a clean source do.
That's a big difference.
That's a pretty big red flag.
Big red flag, yeah. I mean, something's probably going on there.
Right, but does that automatically mean the bad water is causing the diarrhea?
Well, not necessarily. Correlation doesn't equal causation, right?
Right.
We need more evidence to prove it. But the 2x2 table is a really good first step. Tells us if we need to look closer.
Okay, so it's not just about water and diarrhea, right? You could use this for all sorts of stuff.
All sorts of stuff. Any health research question, really, think about, like, a new medication.
Okay, yeah.
Treatment versus placebo. That goes in the rows. Improved health versus no improvement in the columns. Boom, 2x2 table.
Wow, I'm seeing how versatile this is.
Or risk factors for a disease, smoking, and lung cancer. The 2x2 table has got you covered.
It's like a foundational tool, just to see if a relationship even exists.
Yes.
And if it does, then we can dig deeper and figure out what's really going on.
Exactly. And it doesn't stop there.
What do you mean?
We don't just want to know, is there a connection? We want to know, how strong is it?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That's where things like relative risk and odds ratio come in.
Ooh, those sound kind of complicated.
They're not so bad, really. They're just calculations. We get them right from the numbers in our trusty 2x2 table.
Okay, break it down for us. What's relative risk?
Well, relative risk tells us how much more likely someone who's exposed to the cause is to have the outcome compared to someone who wasn't exposed.
So, back to our water example. If the relative risk is high, that means people drinking from that suspect source are way more likely to get diarrhea.
Exactly, compared to the folks drinking from the clean source.
Got it. And what about odds ratio? What's that tell us?
It gives us a similar but slightly different perspective on the strength of the association.
Okay. So both of these, relative risk and odds ratio, they're helping us figure out how important a finding might be.
Exactly.
This is making me feel like some kind of data detective.
I like it.
We're using this 2x2 table to uncover hidden clues about health and disease. But Dr. Al-Hakimi's course talks about this as just one type of descriptive statistic, right?
Right.
What are some others that researchers use a lot?
Well, the 2x2 table really shines when we're looking at the relationship between two categorical variables.
Categorical meaning?
Like yes-no answers or different categories.
Okay, I see.
But sometimes we need different tools.
Like what?
Like if we're dealing with numerical variables. Things like blood pressure readings or heights.
Okay, numbers instead of categories. So what do we use for those?
Things like scatter plots and box plots can be really helpful.
Ooh, visuals. I like it when we get to see the data.
Me too.
So how do those work?
Okay, let's say you're curious about the relationship between someone's height and weight. You suspect taller people tend to weigh more.
Yeah, I can see that.
So a scatter plot would show you that relationship visually.
How?
Each dot on the plot represents one person with their height on one axis and their weight on the other.
Uh-huh.
And if you see the dots kind of clustering in an upward sloping line, that basically confirms your suspicion.
Taller people, DO, generally weigh more.
Exactly. So the scatter plot gives us a quick way to see if two numerical variables are related.
Okay, makes sense. And what about box plots? What do they do?
Those are great when you want to compare how a numerical variable is distributed across different groups.
Like, give me an example.
Okay, imagine you're looking at blood pressure readings between men and women.
Okay.
A box plot would create a separate box for each group, showing you the median, the spread of the data, and any outliers.
And that tells us.
It gives you a quick snapshot of whether men and women's blood pressure readings tend to differ.
It's like we're building this whole toolbox for making sense of health data.
I like that.
2x2 tables for those yes-no categories.
Yeah.
Scatter plots when we're looking at numbers changing together.
Yeah.
And box plots for comparing groups.
It's a good set of tools.
Yeah, it is. And are these just the first step?
Often, yeah. Once we've summarized and visualized the data, we want to go further, make predictions, test hypotheses. That's where inferential analysis comes in.
Oh, that sounds like a whole other level.
It is. But before we go there,
yeah,
one thing about that 2x2 table really struck me. How organized it is. Dr. Al-Hakimi mentions putting the cause, or exposure, in the rows and the outcome, often the disease, in the columns.
Right.
Is there a specific way those columns are arranged?
You noticed that. That's great. And yes, there's a convention. We usually start with the outcome we're most interested in. Often that's the presence of the disease.
So that goes in the first column. Exactly. So if your columns are has disease and doesn't have disease, you'd put has disease first.
Why do we do that?
Makes it easier to read and interpret those row percentages, which, are key for understanding the relationship.
It's like a little detail that makes a big difference when you're trying to make sense of all the data.
All right, I think I'm ready for the next level. This inferential analysis, what can you tell us about it?
Okay, so inferential analysis, it's like data analysis 2.0, right?
You could say that.
What's the main idea?
It's going beyond just describing the data. It's about making predictions and drawing conclusions about a whole population, not just the people in our study.
Okay, so it's like we're not just looking at our little sample anymore.
Right. We're trying to say something meaningful about everyone, the whole pie, not just a slice.
It's like that drug trial example again. We want to know if the drug actually works for everyone with that condition, not just the people who happen to be in the study.
Exactly, and that's where all those statistical tests come in.
The ones with the scary names.
Yeah, sometimes they sound intimidating, but they each have a specific job to do. P-values, confidence intervals, chi-square tests, ANOVAs. Dr. Al-Hakimi covers a lot of them.
So each test is kind of like a specialized tool for a specific data situation.
That's a great way to put it.
Can we break down a couple of them just to get a sense of what they're actually doing?
Sure. Let's take the chi-square test. Remember our 2x2 table?
Yep, our trusty table.
This test helps us figure out if an association we see in our table, like between that suspect water source and diarrhea, is statistically significant. Meaning, is it likely a real relationship or just random chance?
Oh, okay. So it's kind of like adding a layer of rigor, making sure we're not getting excited about a pattern that's just like random noise.
Exactly. We don't want to jump to conclusions. What about confidence intervals? Have you heard of those?
Oh, yeah. I see those all the time in research articles. But honestly, I don't always know what they mean.
Think of them like giving our estimate a range. Acknowledging that there's always some uncertainty.
Uncertainty.
Yeah, we're dealing with data. So instead of saying this drug reduces the risk by 20%, we say we're 95% confident the true reduction is somewhere between 15% and 25%.
So it's a range instead of a single number.
Right. And that range gives you more info. A narrow interval means we're pretty sure about our estimate.
And a wide one means we're less sure.
Exactly. Like, we've got a general idea, but we need more data to narrow it down.
I get it. So quantifying uncertainty is important in statistics.
So important. And confidence intervals help us do that. It sounds like Dr. Alakimi's course gets pretty deep into the technical side of these tests.
Yeah, there are definitely some formulas involved.
But even if we don't become statisticians ourselves, just understanding what those tools are, FOR, is super valuable.
I agree.
It's like being able to appreciate a good mechanic, even if you don't know how to rebuild an engine. You can still understand why it's important to have someone who knows what they're doing, making sure everything's running smoothly and safely.
Right. You trust the experts to get it right. So in health research, the statisticians are making sure the evidence is solid and the conclusions make sense.
That's a great way to think about it. It's all about being informed consumers of data, especially when it comes to our health. It's amazing to see how all these pieces fit together.
I know, we've come a long way. We started with those basic relationships between two variables, bivariate analysis.
And we learned about that awesome 2x2 table, how it can reveal patterns, especially when we look at those row percentages.
Then we took it a step further, learning how to measure the strength of those associations, relative risk, odds ratio.
And we even got into some visuals, scatter plots, and box plots for when we're dealing with numbers instead of categories.
And then today, the grand finale, inferential analysis. How researchers use data to make predictions and draw conclusions that apply to the whole world, not just a small study.
We've built up quite the toolkit. I feel a lot more confident about navigating all those data-driven claims we see every day.
Me too. And it sounds like there's still so much more to learn.
Oh, absolutely. The world of statistics is vast, but we've got a solid foundation now.
Yeah, that's a good feeling.
The key is to stay curious, to keep asking questions and exploring. Think about a health question you've always been interested in.
Okay.
Could you use a 2x2 table to investigate it? What variables would you choose? What patterns might you uncover?
I love that challenge. I'm already thinking about some ideas. Thanks for being such a great guide on this data journey.
My pleasure. It's always fun to explore these concepts.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it as fascinating and empowering as we have.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, stay curious and keep exploring the power of data.